right, Dave. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with me. I know we've been going back and forth for a little while now. I've been calling you for quite some time, and it seems like you're ready to start looking at places. Is that right?
Yeah, Ian, you've done a very great job at following up for the past 4 years.
That's right. Every month for the last 4 years, I've called you.
Now you have that. And now we're here.
Well, I'm really excited. I know for anybody, buying a home is a huge milestone in your life, and I'm grateful to be a part of that. Before we really dive into it, tell me a little bit about yourself. What has you here today?
Well, one, you've been calling me, so I guess it's time for me to buy a house. So, just going back, started my home search journey 4 years ago, and just been renting for so long that I just feel like now is the time. The rates are going up, right? So I'm gonna be here for another 10 years. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me, David. And where you live now?
I live in town. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Well, we'll definitely get more into that in a little bit. Before we dive in, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. This is your first purchase here on island, right?
Yes, it is.
All right, I think that's great. You might be feeling a little bit of butterflies, a little nervous. That's really normal for first-time home buyers. So part of us walking through this is to make sure that you feel really confident. After our conversation today, you should really feel like a pro in buying real estate and know what's going to be expected of you to get the home of your dreams. Sound good?
Sounds good, yeah.
First things first, we're going to go over the MLS sheet and just property information sheets. Just every property that we look at is going to have an info sheet, so I want you to be able to read that and understand what you're looking at.
Okay.
Then we're going to cover what an offer is, how we write them, even what a counter offer is. Then we'll go over the escrow timeline as well as our search criteria, plus a few things to know about financing. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds good.
So really want you to understand my job here is to help you get into the best property for the best price. How do I do that? I am here to advise you and guide you, give you information, really just being able to put you in the best position to make the best choices for yourself. Make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay.
Feel comfortable with it.
So right here, we have an MLS or info fact sheet. This is going to have all the property information about every property we go see. They're all pretty much going to look the same, just obviously the information is going to be different.
Yeah.
So right here at the top, imagine I have an info sheet right here. Right here at the top, we're going to see obviously the property address. Okay. You need to be able to identify and distinguish the properties. In the top right corner, you're going to have the property list prices. You might notice a difference between the original list price and the current listing price. That's going to tell us if maybe the price has changed, depending on how long the property's been on the market. Sometimes sellers, if they're motivated, are going to lower that price as time goes on to try and entice buyers.
Okay.
You're also going to have information about the number of bedrooms, the number of bathrooms, the square footage. If it's a house, there's going to be land, right? So what's actually included in the purchase.
Okay.
There's also going to be information about how long it's been on the market, so that's the days on market. That's going to be really important moving forward. And then there's also going to be information about, agent remarks, public remarks, so information that they're going to put in there for you to know and for me to know about the property. There's also going to be inclusions. So really important when you're purchasing a property to know what are you actually getting with it. Most properties, unless stated otherwise, are going to include basic appliances like the refrigerator, the range, the oven, the stove, that sort of thing. So unless it's stated otherwise in the exclusions, we can typically assume that those are going to be part of the purchase. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds good.
So let's dive into what you're actually looking for. Tell me a little bit about your ideal home.
Yeah, Ian, I want the best house, the best neighborhood. It has to be at least 2 bedrooms. Has to be pet friendly. I have my 2 cats with me. And at the end of the day, I want the property to be in the best location. So that's kind of what I'm looking for.
Okay. Best location. There's a lot to unpack there. So let's start with, I guess, the size. 2 bedrooms.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be you and your cats. Is anybody else going to be living in there with you?
No, just me and my cats.
Gotcha. And so I heard minimum 2 bedroom. There's no way we can work with a 1 bedroom or anything.
Yeah, I mean, I just live in a 1 bedroom now, and I feel like it's too small for me. And if I'm gonna get into something, I want to get into something that's a little bit bigger. So
Awesome. Yeah, makes perfect sense. If we found something that was a 3 bedroom, even would that work for you, or would that be too big?
oh yeah, I'd buy it in a heartbeat.
Awesome. And you mentioned you want to be in the best location. What does that mean to you?
Best location. Well, I work in town, so preferably I want to be close to my work. I don't want to be like far out west. I mean, the furthest I'll go is Pearl City at the most. So I want to stick to town.
Pearl City towards the west, and then east way, you thinking Waikiki or?
No, I would say before Kahala, you know, I don't want to go out too far out east. So yeah, mainly just in downtown. I'd say Alamana area would probably be perfect.
Makes sense. Okay. And you mentioned you're renting. When ideally are you guys on a lease right now?
Yeah, we are on a lease for about 6 months. 6 months left on our lease.
Gotcha.
And yeah.
Okay. And so I would imagine, are you trying to line up the end of your lease with moving into your new place, or is there any way you'd be looking to move sooner?
I could move sooner, it really depends, but overall, I think I want to time the ending of my lease.
Right.
I don't want to move close.
Yeah, totally, makes sense. So we're thinking probably target closing date, target move-in date, maybe around April or so, 6 months from now?
Yeah.
April, May?
Yeah, that works.
Perfect. I know we talked about it a little bit before, but you know, tell me more about what drove you to look now? Why is now a good time for you to move?
It's just I feel like I have enough money saved up to put down on a property, and the rates aren't getting any lower. So if it's time for me to move, I want to make sure that I'm moving now, or at least try to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. And I guess, you know, in the off chance that we're not able to find you a great home and it works for your budget, what would be the backup plan for you?
I haven't really thought about my backup plan. I mean, worst case scenario, I'm just gonna have to rent, stay renting.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm more than confident that we'll be able to find you something, but you always want to have a contingency just in case.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good.
Before we move on, are there a couple things I want to get on the same page and just make sure? Is there anything that you would consider non-negotiable about the home that you're looking for?
The non-negotiables, my pets are really important. My 2 cats, they gotta go with me wherever I go.
So pet friendly.
It has to be at least 2 bedroom and the location, close to work.
Gotcha. So all the things that we talked about.
Yes.
And then just kind of as a beginning framework, what was your monthly budget that you're looking to keep it to?
Well, right now I'm paying $2,600 a month, right? So I want to stay under like $3,000.
$3,000.
Can everybody write that question down? What was your monthly budget? So David, if I ask you what your budget to buy a house is, and you haven't been pre-approved yet, will you know what it is?
Not unless I got cash.
Probably not, yeah, unless you have cash. No, that's a good point. However, most of us know what? Why would he ask that over saying that? What's that?
Most of us would know our rent payment.
Yeah, they know it, yeah. And so Ian just straight up asking, where do you want to keep your monthly payments around, is a really great way to find out where they are, rather than letting them say, because notice he didn't say, what do you want to spend on a house? Do you want to spend 400, 500? Ian's going to tell him what he qualifies for, what he can purchase. So, good question.
Yeah. You said about $3,000 a month?
Yeah, that would be my absolute max. That's like everything.
Okay, so utilities, HOA, and the mortgage with principal and interest.
Yes,
Everything,
yes,
taxes.
yes.
Gotcha. So yeah, whenever we look at properties, I'll be able to break down our monthly budget for you, just so you know exactly if we get this place at this price, what you're going to be paying every single month. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds great.
Is there anybody else in the home buying process? I know it sounds like it's just you and your cats moving in. Is there anyone else that's a major decision maker on this?
No, just me and my cats.
Why is that such a good question? Especially if, let's say David is a young 20-something who is buying his first property. Very often somebody in this situation is going to have what?
Partner.
Not a partner.
Parents?
Sometimes.
Parent. Well, he already said no partner, but parent, yeah. Very often parents are going to help give a down payment. And so by Ian asking just, is there anybody, because initially he said, is anybody else living with you? Now he said, is there any other decision makers part of this? And that's when David would be like, oh, my dad's going to give me a down payment. Good to know. Anything I should be aware of when we're shopping with them, or are you running it? Well, they're actually going to want to see every house we see as well. So that's good to know.
Also, careful with those questions too. You don't want to be too like, oh, David, are you married? Are you single? You know, you don't want to ask like those kinds of questions, and you definitely have to be careful with how you ask. There's also like fair housing stuff when it comes to, do you have a family? You know, asking those questions. You have to be really careful with that. So just to recap, David, just to make sure I'm on the same page, you're looking for minimum 2 bedrooms, something in town, probably Pearl City to Kahala area. You got 2 cats, so they got to come with you, right? You want to keep it to about $3,000 a month or under, right? Is there anything I missed?
You nailed it. You nailed it.
Awesome. Well, at this point, you know, I've asked you so many questions, David. What questions do you have for me before we move on?
So, how much do I have to pay for all of this?
Pay for?
For your services, yeah.
Oh, that's a really great question, David. So I get paid from the sellers. You pay me indirectly just because, say for instance, we buy a home for $500,000. So sellers are going to be getting $500,000 from you, whether that's partially in cash or partially from a lender on your behalf, right? Sellers pre-negotiate with their agent to help them sell their property. That's going to be typically anywhere from 4 to 6%. And that will normally be split with that seller's agent. Halfway in the middle. So say it's a 5% commission, I'll typically get 2.5% of that, the sellers will get 2.5%. So I get paid only once we close on the property. It's not something that comes out of your pocket.
Got it.
Makes sense?
So sellers pay you the commission off of their net proceeds.
That is correct.
Okay. Okay, yeah, sounds great.
Any other questions you got?
You guys have any other questions for?
What is typical
Have a-
questions you got here?
Come on, David, I know you got some.
Well, I really like how he said that. When he asked how much he's gonna give commission, the delivery was real smooth. But as far as questions, I still need to think of for one real quick, so if you can hit on that.
Yolanda, you got a question?
When you're doing this presentation with your buyer, are you actually showing them like a MLS printout of a home just so that you can kind of tour them through the sheet?
Oh yeah, totally. And you'll typically be on a showing, so it'll be really easy to just walk them through it, especially before as you get to the property, just so that they know what they're looking at. You don't just hand it to them; they're just like trying to figure it out. Good question. And really quick, back to David's question too about the commission. You do not want to be like skirting around how you get paid. Right? You want to be very transparent about, yeah, you do pay me. It doesn't come directly out of your pocket up front, but indirectly you are paying me. Okay, and you want to be very honest about that. Yes, Johnson.
I know that you were following up with him for like 4 years, over the course of 4 years. Is this buyer presentation something you do the first time you meet in person?
Ideally, yeah. Ideally, I would have tried to meet him sooner, but just for the sake of role play, I wasn't able to. You could even do it over a Zoom conference meeting, but yeah, definitely. All right, moving on. So what I'm going to do, David, after this conversation, based off of everything you told me, I'm going to take that information and try and narrow our search a little bit. So at any given time, there's probably 2,000 properties actively for sale on Oahu. Obviously, most of them are not going to be a good fit for us. They're either going to be too small, too expensive, don't allow cats, in the wrong location, whatever. So we don't need to waste your time by showing you every single property out there and driving all over the island. So I'm going to narrow that search down to only show you things that fit within that criteria we just talked about. Ideally, we're going to get that list down to maybe 20 or 30 properties. Okay, and then of those, even so, you should be able to eliminate ones really easily if it doesn't stand out to you. Okay.
Yeah.
Really important to keep in mind as well, especially for first-time home buyers, it's going to be very hard, almost impossible to find a perfect home. Okay, especially at our budget, we're probably going to be looking for maybe like 8 out of 10. Okay. The only way we're going to be getting a perfect home is if we really build it ourselves, right? And that might cost $2 million, right? So I want you to keep that in mind. The biggest things that we really want to look out for are price, location, and layout. Okay, those are 3 things that after we purchase, after we close on the home, we really can't change. If there's little things here and there, like we don't like the carpets, we don't like the backsplash, maybe the paint in the kitchen isn't our favorite color, right? Those things, depending on all the other variables, they might not be deal breakers for us just because down the line we can make changes, right? And even add value, giving you equity down the line. Make sense?
Yeah.
So now let's talk about what it means to actually submit an offer when we do find a property that we really like. Okay. So really easy to do. A few important steps. First and foremost, we're going to need a pre-approval letter. Okay, so this is just to show the sellers, if we are getting financing, show the sellers that we've gone through the process and we are serious and qualified to purchase their home. We want the sellers to be taking our offer seriously, so being able to submit that with a pre-approval is extremely advantageous. Make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
And we'll talk more about what it takes to get that in a little bit. Next, I always encourage my buyers to write a cover letter to the seller for the home. Tell them a little bit about yourself. It can make a big difference when it's not just a contract and they actually know, what you like about the home, things that you appreciate. Especially if they've lived there for a long time, there's probably things that they like about the home too. So if you can connect on that level, sometimes that can go beyond just price.
Okay.
Then I will always call the listing agent and basically just try and gather as much information as possible about the listing, about the sellers, why are they selling, what are they looking for in an offer, particularly if it's competitive, if there are other offers on the table. Those are things we definitely want to be aware of. Okay, so we're gathering information, trying to figure out, based off of our qualifications and based off what we know about the sellers, how are we going to craft the best possible offer. Make sense?
Makes sense.
We'll also review the most recent sales in the neighborhood, so look at comps, to make sure that their pricing is in line, right? So the comparable sales and what the market is showing that the property might be worth today, as well as the competitive landscape, so how many offers might be on the table. Those are all things that are going to inform the type of offer we're going to submit. I also want to explain how sometimes our offer can stand out without being just the highest price. Okay, so we can be competitive with our price, but if we have more desirable terms, the seller may also be more willing to take those up. We can sometimes offer to pay or waive certain items like cleaning, surveys, termites, closing costs, condo docs, even allow a rent back to the seller if they need it. So these are all things that we can be really creative with in our terms.
What is rent back?
Good question, Dave. So sometimes, I'm glad you asked. Sometimes the seller, typically if they're going to be selling their home, they have to move somewhere, right? They're going to be leaving their current place. So a lot of the time that means that they have to find a replacement property to move into. Sometimes it's not always easy to line up the closing dates of your sale to the purchase. And so by offering them a buffer, by allowing them to rent the property and stay a little bit longer after closing, that can make their lives easier in their journey to the next property. Make sense? Make sense? So most of the time when we submit an offer, as much as we love sellers to just accept every offer we submit, most of the time they're going to be submitting a counter offer. Okay, counter offers are really, really good, especially in this market if it is more competitive. Basically, it means that we have a seat at the table and they're willing to work with us. Okay, so counter offer is basically just a conversation between the buyer and seller, trying to reach a middle ground on price, terms, what have you. we're not obligated to accept somebody's counter offer if they send it to us, but we can always counter back, and sometimes you can go back and forth with that until you reach an agreement.
Okay.
Once you have an accepted offer or counter offer, we have what's called an executed contract. So this means that both buyers and sellers have signed off and accepted terms and pricing, and we are under contract. You might also hear the term we're in escrow. So what is escrow? Are you familiar with escrow?
My first time ever hearing that word. What is escrow?
I'm glad you asked.
I like how it sounds, you know, but I don't know what that is.
It's a great question. Escrow is basically, it's a couple things. First off, escrow is a company. So all they are as a company is a neutral third party that facilitates the transaction. So they mediate between buyers and sellers. Okay, so they're completely neutral. Basically, they just hold the funds until everything is executed per the contract. They handle a lot of the legal stuff, so drafting the deed, transferring title insurance, all that stuff. And then once everything is executed per the contract, both sides are satisfied, the funds, they will disperse the funds to the seller and transfer the title and deed to the buyer. Make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
So that's escrow as a company. We also refer to escrow as a process and a timeline, which is what we'll talk about in just a second. So from the point of getting an accepted offer, we are under contract, we are in escrow. So going from getting an accepted offer all the way to closing and getting keys in hand just means that we are in escrow up to closing. The typical escrow timeline is going to be anywhere from 30 to 60 days. Okay, and there's a lot that has to happen in that time period that we will go over right now.
Wow, I did not know that.
Now you do.
Thank you.
Any questions so far, Dave?
No, you covered it all. You guys have any questions? No? Doing great.
Yeah, obviously I'm not following this word for word, but you can see, the structure is the same, right? There's a reason that we put it that way. So when we submit an offer, and even after we get an offer accepted, all that really says to a seller is that we are interested in the property and we would like to learn more. Okay, so there's potential that we might be ready to move forward and purchase this property, but it's certainly not final just because we have an accepted offer. Okay, so this escrow period really is so important because it is our due diligence period.
Right.
So just like with purchasing any major purchase, whether it's a car or a stock or something, you're going to want to do your research and really make sure that you understand what you're purchasing and are comfortable. It makes sense for you to move forward. Okay. So, good question.
So am I locked in? Like if I wanted to submit an offer on a property, am I like able to cancel at certain points, or am I just like locked in?
Absolutely, great question, David. I'm so glad you asked. When we submit an offer, the purchase contract is so great because it gives buyers so much leverage in the negotiation. So once we submit an offer and are under contract, buyers can back out for pretty much any reason for the first 2 weeks or so. Once sellers have accepted an offer from the buyer, they really can't change their mind. They can't cancel unless we fail to perform on our obligations. So primarily that would be not submitting our deposit on time or fulfilling some other obligation within the timeline that we agreed to. But more specifically, we'll talk about contingencies and how you can exit, and particularly when the latest time would be for you to exit. So you're aware of that.
Sounds good.
So-
I trust you.
Look at that, building rapport. So we have gotten an accepted offer. One of the first things that we have to do is submit our initial earnest money deposit. Okay, so this is going to be money. It's either going to be, typically it's $1,000, maybe $5,000, depending on the purchase price, depending on the property. That's money that we submit into escrow. They hold on to it, so it's safe. We're not giving that money directly to the sellers. Really important to understand, this is just like skin in the game. So it's showing the sellers that we are serious, we're motivated to purchase, and we have at least some money, right, to show them that we are capable of buying this property. Really important to understand, This deposit is not an additional fee or anything. It's not part of your closing costs. If you're planning a down payment, this deposit might be credited towards that down payment at closing,
Right.
or it might be credited towards your closing costs if you don't have a down payment.
Right. Okay, makes sense.
So it's going towards the purchase.
Got it. Okay.
Now, really important, typically the first week or two into escrow, we have the opportunity to hire a property inspector and inspect the property as we see fit. So this is one of the most important steps in our due diligence process. We want to get a property inspector in there to really make sure that we understand what we're buying and we understand the condition of the property. So a big misconception with property inspections is that it's a pass-fail kind of thing. The inspector's going to go in there and fail the inspection, or the property's going to pass the inspection. It's not really how it works. It's more of an objective list of items that the inspector will go down and just note the condition of every single item objectively as it goes down. So it's going to be every single detail of the house, from whether or not the outlets work, are the panels on the outlets chipped, does the dishwasher function properly, is the toilet flush, is it secured to the floor, all these little things. And really important to know, every single property, even brand new properties, are going to have things come up on a property inspection.
Really?
Yes.
I did not know that.
It might have a lot of really minor things.
Yeah.
What we really want to keep our eye out for is what we consider to be like the big four major red flags. So those are going to be plumbing, roofing, structural, and electrical. Okay, these are all things, issues with these four things could potentially become very expensive, and depending on our background, depending on our resources, we might not be willing to deal with it. In the event that something like that comes up and it's really alarming, big red flag in the inspection, we have the right to back out, cancel the contract, cancel the purchase, and we'll get our deposits back. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Only downside, only real risk is that the money we pay to the inspector, if we cancel, we don't get that back. Okay, the inspector still has to get paid. So it's a lot better than getting stuck with a property that has all these issues, right? So
That makes sense.
typical cost of the property inspection is going to depend on the size of the property. For what we're looking for, 2-bedroom, you might spend $300 or $400. Okay.
So buyer pays for the inspection.
Correct. Yeah, and that will be due upon receipt of the inspection, not at closing.
I want to hear what are some takeaways, some initial thoughts that you guys have hearing Ian go through this? So this is a lot of stuff to cover, right? Does it feel like it's too much to cover?
No. It's pretty much all in order.
Thank you. So what are some downsides? Let's say Ian skips steps. What are some downsides here? If Ian was to skip a bunch of these steps, what are some things that could happen because he didn't educate them properly?
They might want to back out just because it was a small issue.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
What was that?
Like the little things about the inspection might like make them want to back out, thinking they can get somewhere that was perfect.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So his point of buying a brand new property, there will still be some things that come up. That's perfect. What else? What are some things that could happen if Ian doesn't properly go over these items? Go ahead, Joey.
Lawsuits.
Lawsuits. Yeah, all kinds of reasons.
Oh yeah.
For no reason too.
Maybe
Just out of thin air.
Yeah. No reason. Maybe they don't submit the deposit because they didn't know. And then you default and they cancel. You lose a
And now
bond.
your client's pissed at you, right? What do you think, Chris? What are some things that happen if you don't properly educate your client?
Yes, I would say, not knowing where to drop the check off as well to the escrow. Then also, sometimes they're like, oh, I have to pay for the home inspection, and you can tell them why it's so important that you do pay for a home inspection.
Yeah.
To save them, if the roof is messed up, save them money on that. SRPES is very important, so that they can read through that.
Yeah.
Check it out.
So also keep in mind, the reason we cover this once at the initial consultation is one, to educate them. We could teach them all of these things at a later date. However, what are you doing? What are you doing with your time?
You're saving yourself time.
Yeah, you're making it efficient. You don't have to spend an hour every week, every time giving them an update on all this stuff. You cover it all once, And now you're way more likely to get them under contract, you're way more likely to close, you're gonna have way less issues. Yeah, it saves yourself so many headaches.
The difference between a client who is proactive versus reactive is huge. You know, when you open escrow and they're getting emails from, you know, the escrow company, the lenders, and they're just like, what is this? What is this? What is this? Like, you didn't tell me all this stuff. They're freaking out. Like, they're already stressed out because they're making the biggest purchase ever in their life, right? Like, you can really slow it down by doing this up front. It's really helpful. Also, you will get buyers that, you know, are more driver types. They don't want to sit here through this whole thing.
Yeah.
You know, you'll get that all the time. And so that's really an opportunity for you, one, to kind of vet, like, okay, like, this person isn't willing to put in the time or the attention to do this right. Like, maybe I should dive in and see just how motivated they really are. You know, if they can't sit down for half an hour to learn about how to do this, and it's like, you know, how serious are they really? It doesn't mean that they won't buy, but it's worth addressing. Also, as a professional, as a realtor, you have the right and the obligation to kind of stand up and like tell them, like, no, this is how it's done. This is the best way to do it. You're gonna thank me later for it, right? Like, don't let yourself just get kicked around by every buyer, like, you know, like you don't have work. Make sense? Okay. So let's say the inspection looks good. You know, no red flags. There might be some things here and there. We're ready to proceed. So we approve that inspection. Usually upon acceptance of the inspection, which is going to be, you know, it depends on how we write the contract. It's going to be anywhere from 10 to 14 days after acceptance. After we've approved that inspection, we'll typically submit an additional deposit. Now, this is something that really changes depending on the property, as far as how large that deposit is. Even in some cases we don't even do a deposit, to be honest, because sometimes it's just one extra step that can potentially get messed up. So sometimes it's easier just not to do an additional deposit. But if we do an additional deposit, that will be when that happens. Okay.
Okay.
Around the same time, we're going to be receiving what's called the seller's real property disclosure statement. This is a form filled out by the seller. They're going to provide that to us usually within the first week after getting our contract accepted. All of this is just information you would know about the property, typically from having lived in it and owned it. Okay, so it's things that wouldn't necessarily be covered by the inspection. There might be some overlap, but it's going to be things like history of repairs. You know, how old is the roof? Is there a history of pests or termites? Even things like, you know, is the neighborhood prone to excessive noise? That's all stuff that's going to show up in this form. And just like the property inspection, we're going to have a chance to take a look at this and review it. Typically, upon receipt of this form, we'll have about a week to review it and see if there's anything that really stands out to us as a red flag. Make sense?
Yeah, sounds good.
And then just like the inspection, if there is a red flag, something we're just not comfortable with, maybe the roof is 100 years old and we don't have the cash to replace the roof right after closing, you know, that might be a deal breaker for us. So if we're within our timeline, typically, like I said, a week after receiving the form, we can terminate, back out, and get our deposits back. Got it?
Yeah.
Now, depending on the property we're looking at, in our case, any property, townhomes or condos, or even some single-family homes, are going to be under the jurisdiction of an association, or a homeowners association, HOA. So, in our case, you know, we're probably looking at condos and townhomes. We're going to be getting information about this association, this governing body. That's going to be really important to you as a homeowner and a member of that community. Okay, so we'll probably get those documents about a week after acceptance date. And then same as the disclosure statement, we'll typically have about a week to review them. Okay.
What's the disclosure?
The seller's real property, the SRPDS we just talked about.
Okay.
Yeah.
SRPDS.
So as far as the condo docs, there's a lot of legal documents in there that are going to be very dense, a lot to read through. You know, we always recommend, just because we can't provide legal counsel, right? I'm not a lawyer. It would not be a bad idea for you to have an attorney review those documents with you. It would probably be about the same cost as an inspection. Most of my clients don't get that done and they turn out fine, but again, it would not be a bad idea. Really big things that we're going to want to look out for is house rules. So are you allowed to have cats? You know, Are you allowed to have loud music? Are you allowed to rent out your property short term or whatever? Stuff like that. There's going to be a reserve study. So every association has a budget. Part of those maintenance fees that you're paying is going to go to their budget to maintain the building, and we want to make sure that they have reserves to account for upcoming capital expenses, big expenses that are inevitably going to happen, like a new roof, or new plumbing, or new elevator, stuff like that. There's also going to be a budget, so that's going to detail what those HOA fees are going to be, the maintenance fees that you're going to be paying, what that money's going to, right? How much is going to reserves, how much is going to other parts of their budget. Make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
And then same thing as everything else we've talked about so far. If something comes up that we're not comfortable with, we can terminate within our agreed time period, back out, get our deposits back. Okay, so if they have no money in the reserves, that might be a concern, right? Any questions so far? All right, a couple more things. Typically, we're going to be getting a termite inspection. Sellers will typically pay for that. So they're just going to go in, see if there is evidence of termites or live termites. If there are, then sellers will pay for the treatment, okay, whether that's tenting or spot treatment. Okay. Termites are super common here in Hawaii. It's not a huge deal. As long as they haven't been neglected for a long time, you just treat them and it won't be a problem. Anytime we get a loan, we're going to have to get an appraisal. So basically what this is if the lenders are lending you $500,000 to purchase a home, they want to make sure that home is worth $500,000. In the event that you default, you're not able to pay, and they have to reclaim the property, that they're not going to lose money on that investment. Okay, so they're going to send an appraiser out and basically just determine the value of that property. In some cases, if the appraisal comes in low, say we're purchasing for $500,000 and they appraise it at $450,000, that $450,000 has to come from somewhere, or that $50,000 difference has to come from somewhere. So that's either going to come from your pocket, it's going to come from the seller in terms of them lowering the purchase price, or maybe we'll negotiate and meet in the middle somewhere. Okay, they lower $25,000. Make sense? One way that we can strengthen our offer is with an appraisal clause. So if the appraisal does become an issue, we can guarantee that we will cover that difference up to a certain amount. So that can be really effective in ensuring that the sellers are going to get what we're telling them we're going to pay. Make sense?
Makes sense.
So moving forward, typically about a week prior to closing, we're going to have the property emptied out if there's trash and junk and furniture, staging stuff. They're going to empty that out, the sellers. Sometimes, depending on the contract, we'll have them clean it afterwards. And then 5 days prior to closing, we're going to do what's called a final walkthrough. So we're going to go through that property one more time and just make sure that nothing's changed between now and when we got that inspection done. Okay? Typically, 3 days prior to closing, you're going to sign loan documents, title transfer documents, all that escrow stuff that we've been talking about. And usually that day or the day following is when funding will take place. So the lenders are going to wire their funds to escrow. You're going to wire your down payment and the remainder balance of closing costs. Then 2 days after we fund and they receive all the funds, we can record, which is the same as closing. And on that day, you can receive the keys to move in.
Okay, so I don't just get keys right away, right?
That's correct.
I didn't know that.
No, I wish. Yeah. And do you have a question, David?
Yeah, I got a question. Let's say you give them the seller disclosure or the inspection. You guys do the inspection and all that, and there's something that they have an issue with, but it's not really a deal breaker. So it's something maybe they could somewhat work with or something, but they don't really necessarily want to back out of the deal. In that situation, would you tell them that they have the power to renegotiate and add like extra conditions to the offers and such at inspection, or when they see seller disclosure, or do they kind of have to just like take it or leave it kind of situation?
Yeah, that's a great question, David. You do always have the option of renegotiating, right? So if something comes up in the inspection you can always request, like, hey, you know, like you said, not a deal breaker, but we don't want to deal with this ourselves, right? If something, like, if the toilet doesn't work, it's like, most people want to move in to a house with a toilet works, right? They don't want to fix that right off the bat. So you can ask and have the sellers either repair it, or maybe just credit you the money, what it might cost to repair it. Keep in mind, they're not under any obligation to do so, right? So by saying no, they do so at the risk that you might back out, and they might, you know, go back on the market and have to find another buyer, right? So depending on the situation, depending on the seller's motivation, they might be willing to negotiate with you.
So how would you explain that to your client?
Pretty similar to what I just said. Yeah, I would pretty much just say that.
Yeah, and it really depends. I mean, if they send you an agreement, like when you submit an offer before it gets accepted, and the seller is like, hey, just letting you know we're not going to be repairing anything. This is going to be sold as is, right? You have to relay that message to your client. So what if the fact that you get from the seller, you're then going back and saying, buyer, so the seller said they're selling this as is, they're not going to do any repairs or any credit batch. What would you like to do? Would you like to move forward, or what, you know, so that depends as well.
All right, David. Well, it sounds like, you know, I know we talked about a lot today.
It's not a whole lot.
After our conversation, I'm excited to get you on the road to finding your dream property. You know, before we move forward, I do need you to sign this contract. This is basically a buyer's representation contract. Okay, so all this means is that you and I are working together, and I'm representing you as your agent to help you find a home. So under no circumstance does this obligate you to buy anything. You can sign this today and never buy, and that would be perfectly fine, right? But obviously, after our conversation, it seems like you are interested in buying and you would like to move forward. So if that is the case, we would have to move forward after getting this signed.
Do I have to sign this now?
Yes, typically. If you have any questions about it, we can definitely read through it right now.
Yeah, I'll sign it right now.
All right.
That's usually how it goes.
I trust you, you know.
If you're really thorough with it and the whole consultation, like, you won't even get that many objections
Yeah.
to getting it signed. It's just kind of like, all right, like, before we wrap up, just got to get this signed and we'll be on our way.
Yeah.
Nice job, Ian. Everybody clap for Ian. You did a great job. Okay, we're gonna wrap up in 5 minutes here. I know this content is dense, and it's also hard to do and hard to memorize, and it is not the most exciting thing in the world, is it? It's way easier to just open a door, show somebody the house, and then leave. However, that is a waste of your time, it's a waste of the client's time, it's just making problems for yourself in the future. So, who has some concerns about walking their clients through this? Or who has some concerns about anything on the paperwork?
Oh, I
Go ahead,
think
John.
it's more of the clients retaining the information, so it might be good to.
They won't remember shit.
Yeah.
They'll remember nothing. However,
So-
when you remind them of something like the secondary deposit, they will say, oh yeah, that's right. And it's so much easier to hear it the second time than it is the first time.
Got it.
What are some concerns? So let's go through some quick buyer objections. So let's say that, first of all, Ian did a great job answering the question of, do I have to sign this now? The answer to that always is, yes, please. So let's try that, Joey. Do I have to sign this now?
Present on the buyer,
No, just ask me that question.
yeah. Do you have to sign this now?
Yes, please. So Kira, go ahead and ask me. Do I have to sign this now?
Yes, please.
Yes,
You want me to say, okay. Do I have to sign this ring?
yes, please. Very easy. It's not really an objection, it's just a question. Now, however, let's say I say something like, Kira, you know, I'm not comfortable signing this yet. What would you say?
Sign it.
Maybe. In other words, okay, how about
We
this?
can read through it together.
Exactly, that's what Ian said. So, oh, of course, let's go through it together right now. And it's only 2 pages. And so I will sit there with them and I will read it out loud and explain what everything means. And usually after 1 minute, they just say, you know what, never mind, I'll just sign it. I've never had them not sign it. Ever. Like I've never had a buyer that rejected signing my buyer consult, my buyer report, ever.
But if they didn't, would you still work with them? If they
No.
would absolutely
No,
refuse?
I mean, I would ask why. I mean, and that's a great question to find out. Maybe there is something going on. Maybe they're not serious. If they're not willing to commit to me, I'm not going to spend all this time on them. Absolutely not. I'll spend my day going to find another buyer that will. So any other last minute thoughts, questions, feedback? I know it's dense, but I would recommend to everybody to take this packet and literally just memorize it. Read it out loud every single day for a month and you'll have it done. Go ahead and keep that packet on. Thanks. You already have it, but it's fine.
But this is clean, this is like, nice.
You have it. You're yours. All right, any other last minute thoughts, questions, feedback for our two gentlemen?
I got one.
Go ahead, Dave.
So you guys, I see you guys were in the open house, right?
Okay.
And you don't want to just let them do whatever, you need to consult them and show you guys your expertise, right? So what is you guys' hooks to get them started and interested in the consultation?
Good question. That's your package. If you go to the second page on, you're talking about open houses, right? So I think what you're referring to, David, is January 6th, how to get 2 clients from every open house. Is that right?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was talking about, but I would like to hear one of you guys, or maybe both of you guys, hooks
That's
on
an hour-long class. Come to the class.
Oh, snap. Consultation right there.
That will be for the
Save the date.
Save the day, man.
Save the day.
No, we're covering it. That's what we're going over. Yeah, right?
Yeah. Okay, well, that answers my question.
Great. Cool. Good job, you guys. Thank you for making the commitment to come out after a holiday. I know it's hard, but you did it anyway, so good job. Hopefully you all learned a little bit. Good on to these guys. You guys did a great job.